Okay, and here we are live, just getting set up with some of the technical aspects of things. If anybody is watching it, looks like they're not, but they will in the future be seeing this. Just waiting here to see what that holds. I'm going to go ahead and try screen share to make sure that that's working. Oh, there it is. Application window. Okay, so you can see the slides. It's a call to action in particular would be. I wonder if I can enlarge that at all. All right, story, you people. All right. Okay, so we're just gonna hang out here for a while. I've got the, make sure that goes up. Okay, presenting to everyone. Interesting. I'm presenting to everyone. Screen sharing me. Why is it not showing me? Edwin profile. No. Okay. How do I get back to Google Hangouts? It's right there. Okay. There. Okay. 10 minutes till. Welcome. This is Dr. Cameron Thompson. I'm just waiting a few minutes here to make sure everything is working out right. As you may have seen, I'm just double checking a few things that, as far as some of the tools for the workshop broadcasting on the technical side of things. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? You can enter into the chat, which I believe should be in the upper right-hand corner. I just want to be sure that everybody's able to see me and or rather everybody's able to hear me and interact here the way that we want to make sure that this works out all right. If you could go ahead and just introduce yourself in the chat window, and I will just see that that's coming through here. If you're looking at the YouTube video page, that because there's a couple of ways that you could be seeing this depending on the device that you're on. If you're looking at the YouTube video page, you should see a chat window or option in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. If you are in Google Hangouts, then it should be over on the right-hand side, or you should have an option to make the chat box available to see. Good morning, Andrea. I'm glad to see you here. All right, who else have we got here? Can everybody hear me all right? Please give some sort of acknowledgement that the audio is coming through then. Looks like at least one person is able to hear me. If you could just please enter into the chat to make sure that you can hear me. I want to be able to get everybody gets the best experience out of this. We can. Good. Got another. We'll open this back up here. It looks like we've got everybody here from what I can tell. If you could just, maybe somebody that's just arrived. Welcome. This is the Discover Your Mission workshop, and I just wanted a quick double check as we're going through some of the technical aspects, some of the various tools that are on here, just to make sure everything's working right. If you could go ahead and enter into the chat box, introduce yourself, just give your name, say here that and that you can hear me. Make sure that we've got at least the audio working, and I'm presuming the video is working based on the feedback that I've gotten so far. Certainly, if you're having any difficulties with this, please feel free to let me know as well. There should be a chat box option in the upper right-hand corner of the YouTube video page. It might be popped out in a different window if you've had that set up before, but there should be an option to show chat that you can, a little bar in the upper right-hand corner says show chat. You can hit that, and then it should pop up in a chat box where you can enter in something to send a message to myself and be advised it also be visible to all the other participants here. All right, well, if everybody is here, then the sound is working and all that, then we will go ahead and begin. This will be the Discovery Immersion Workshop. First, I'll introduce myself here. If I can, there we go. I think I've got that set up now. You should see my face here for a moment. I'm just getting, learning the ropes with some of these technical tools. This is the first time we've done a broadcast using any Google technology here. with that, namely the YouTube live streaming here. Anyway, so my name is Dr. Cameron Thompson. I'm with the Virtuous Leadership Institute. Some of you may know, some of you do know me fairly well, and others not very well at all. But a little bit of background for the workshop that we're doing is it is part of a larger whole content of the idea of virtuous leadership, that we're all called to become leaders in our own capacities, in our own respective domains in life. And that really at the heart of leadership is the call to greatness, personal greatness, greatness through serving others as a leader in whatever capacity that might look like in our life, which consists of drawing out the greatness in others. And really at the core of all of that is the discovery and living out of our mission in life, is the discovery and living out of our mission. There's no way that we can lead, or no way we can even lead ourselves in a coherent and ordered life without really cultivating a deep sense of what our mission is, because as we'll see throughout the course of the workshop, our mission is really bound up with our identity. We identify ourselves through our story, the way that we think about, to get kind of psychological here for a second, our narrative identity. We think of ourselves in terms of a narrative, and that is a way of understanding who we are as a story. And at the heart of that is this idea of our mission. If we don't discover and really live out our mission, there's oftentimes an incongruity with our actions. We discover our mission, we can live out our mission. Really getting to the heart of understanding who we are, what it is that we're to be about, helps us frame that up, helps us make decisions. It can become a lodestone or a litmus test for helping decide, make decisions, and discern courses of action throughout our life. As we'll see, fundamentally, what is at the core of my mission? So it's shifting of a paradigm, shifting of a paradigm in life to be rather than, is this good or bad to do? Whatever the decision to be made is this in line with my mission, or is this not? Is this a distraction from what I am fundamentally meant to be about? And as I said, the background of this is that it's related to the larger concept of virtuous leadership, or leading through cultivating of the virtues, understanding that virtue, and the essence of virtue is the essence of leadership is the virtue of magnanimity and humility, that is striving for greatness through self-knowledge and service of others. And this concept of virtuous leadership was developed, really given voice to, by a gentleman named Alexander Havard, who is a Frenchman living currently in Russia. He's developed the virtuous leadership system, and you can find out more about that at virtuousleadership.org, which is the website of the organization, and more background on that. But it looks like everybody is here and that we've got things working. So without further ado, we will actually just launch right into the workshop. I want to be sure, just to remind you to go ahead and download, if you've not done so already, the workbook PDF that I sent you in that email, and that should also be available in the chat window. I've entered a link to that here where you should be able to access that. Go ahead and download that now if you haven't done so already. It'd be helpful to have on hand. And then I also recommend printing it off when you get the opportunity to, though it's not necessary to do so right now. I think you might find it helpful nonetheless if you have something to write on, because there's a few exercises that we'll be going through to be able to write something down, whether that's physically or typing it in. And while you get that set up, if you haven't already, I'm going to say a little bit more about myself, just so you understand sort of some of the perspectives that I'll be bringing to the table here. I've been president of the Virtuous Leadership Institute for a few years now, Virtuous Leadership Institute in North America, which is one of a number of institutes around the world. My personal background is as an anthropologist and organizational psychologist. So I've got my doctorate in psychology, focusing on moral character and development within organizational systems. And so that's something that we're going to be sort of bringing to the table as it were as well. So not just at a theoretical level of understanding what our mission is, but actually going through some very practical exercises designed to help us get to the core of understanding what our narrative is, or what our narrative identity, how to understand how to help you understand your story as it's been playing out in your life, and take greater co-authorship with that to become who God has made you to be. And so that's the approach that we'll be taking. So it's very practical and methodological, as well as understanding at a higher level what some of those things are that we can do. Now, to frame up that not everything in terms of discovering your mission is going to be able to be accomplished in this workshop, but the goal of the workshop is to be able to provide you with the tools and skills necessary. We'll do some of the exercises in here. Other of the exercises will take they take longer to do, so that I would give you the tools, explain the exercise, we can talk through them here, and then you can carry out those exercises. And that's what the purpose of the workbook is, to then be able to continue to do some of those exercises in the coming days and weeks. And so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here with the slides that we've got developed here. So feel free to take notes from these as well as we go. I know there's a little bit of a delay, so I want to be sure that everybody's caught up and able to see these slides here now. So having a mission and a sense of mission, understanding what your mission is vital if you wish to grow in the virtue of magnanimity. That's the habit of striving for true human greatness. So in order to do this, it's helpful, as I'm sure you've found in many other aspects of your lives, to write down things. Because when we write down or when we journal, whether that's a sort of in the process of a daily examination of conscience, or keeping a journal on a daily or weekly basis, some sort of regular basis, we're able to capture the thoughts that are in our heads and give them a sort of incarnate concreteness on the page in the real world or in the external world. And in doing that, it can be very helpful to understanding ourselves and seeing continuity over time, or noticing certain patterns and trends. Which is why, in terms of understanding our mission, a helpful approach to doing this is, I'll be sure everybody's seeing this here. Just got notified that it might not be showing through, but you should be seeing the first slide here that says discover your mission. And it's got a sketch of an individual looking up. I hope our video and audio are all synced now. Apologize for that. But it's helpful to write down our mission, to have that. What is my mission? What is the core central thing that I'm meant to be about? And that itself is distilled, as I alluded to earlier, is distilled from really writing out what your personal story is. So we want to start by defining, what do we mean by mission? So a mission is not a vocation. A vocation is your call to live, think, feel, and act in a particular way. You see, your mission, on the other hand, is a call to do a certain thing. So your vocation is always a call from God, and it is the context within which you will live out your mission. So your vocation is, as some more traditional terminology has put it, is the state of life that you are called to live out, the way in which you be in the world. And your mission then, which is normally the result of human considerations, working through the order of providence, if you will, the things in the world that are given to us that play out, it's much more interactive in the natural realm, with ourselves and with other people in the circumstances of our lives. We are all of us born into a certain place and time, whether we like certain aspects of that or not. This is what we've been given, or as some philosophers have referred to as, there's a certain thrownness of our lives. We are thrown into the world at a certain place and time, in a certain context, born to a certain family of origin, facing certain challenges of our day at a macro level, and also at a micro, at a personal level, those things that we face. And it's within that context that we have this interaction with the world around us and the dynamic internal world within us, that we play out, that our mission plays out, and that we can live out our mission or not live out our mission. And then, of course, there are special circumstances where there's been perhaps a supernatural mission given to particular individuals. I think of somebody like Moses, right? Moses or Joan of Arc, go and do this thing. So not just a sort of a supernatural call to a way of life, but a divine imperative to do a certain thing. That's not the ordinary case of things. So for ourselves, we find our mission within the framework of our vocation. And that mission is a process of discovery. There's a lot of more work that we have to put into it and decisions that we need to make about it. There's a way in which our mission is subjective. That is, it is particular to us. Your mission is particular to you. You alone have been put in this world to accomplish this task. And there's a way in which it's also objective. It's objectively discoverable. You may have a mission in life. I believe we all have a mission in life. It is often unclear to us what that mission is, without taking the sort of intentional steps to begin to examine our lives, to examine ourselves, to understand, enter into dialogue with God, enter into a deeper understanding of that sort of ongoing dialogue or interaction that we've been having with everything around us, with other people and with the events of our lives, to understand what our story is, and thus to understand what our mission is. So our vocation is the framework, as I said, within which we discover and carry out our mission. That constitutes our specific contribution to humanity. Your mission is, what is the thing that is your unique contribution to the world? Without a vocation, leadership, even self-leadership, the role that you have in life is devoid of a deeper purpose. But without a mission, your activity in life is devoid of a substance. There's not a clear continual line unless you have a mission, unless you really you begin to deeply understand your mission and make decisions based on that. So many people have a clear sense of their vocation. They may know at a sort of spiritual level what state of life, or in an abstract way, what state of life they might be called to, but it is devoid of substance because they have a difficulty discovering their mission. So they may understand their vocation, they have a difficulty discovering their mission. This is because when you have a deep understanding at a broad sense of what your vocation is, that state of life, the way in which you are called to live in this world, if you don't have that understanding of your personal talents, or if you haven't cultivated or been given the opportunity to cultivate a sufficient imaginative way of looking at the world and looking at yourself, you'll be insufficiently developed. You'll have an insufficiently developed understanding of your mission. Conversely, there are many people who understand their mission, but they're not aware of their vocation. It's because their religious sense of the supernatural dimension of their life is insufficiently developed as well. So in order to discover your mission, you must ask yourself fundamentally two questions. Who am I? And what is the cultural or social challenge that I want to respond to with passion and dedication? So knowledge of yourself and of the world yield the necessary information, the basic information necessary to discover your mission. So now I would ask you to take a look at exercise 1. We're going to go through the first exercise in the series of the workbook. So if you have the workbook printed off, go ahead and turn to that page. If you're just looking at a PDF, you can look at that. I'll also talk through it here. But if you get a piece of paper, or if you're more of the typing kind of person, whether you feel more comfortable writing or typing, take a moment to open up either a document application on your device, or pull out a piece of paper and a pen or pencil to be able to write down jot down a couple of thoughts relating to this exercise. So the first exercise is to identify your goals. And this may seem superficial, but it helps give direction to what it is that you're here to do. And I would just say the first question is that what are your goals for this course? For this workshop? What are your goals for the workshop? What are your personal motivations for signing up? What are your personal motivations for wanting to discover your mission? What are your personal motivations to discover your mission? Go ahead and write that down. And you take a moment to think about it. If you need to, go ahead and write that down. And then also feel free, if you feel so inclined, to make this a little bit more interactional. Feel free to write that into the chat box as well. Again, which should be in the upper right-hand corner of the YouTube page that I believe most of you are watching this live stream on, just to be able to participate back and forth. And I want to say too, feel free to ask questions, send a message here through the chat function that I hope is working for everybody here. And again, if you don't see that in the YouTube page, there should be a bar in the right-hand corner that says show chat or something like that. And that should open up the chat box. You should see a couple of messages that I've sent there. But I'm just going to type something in here. So feel free to share your goals for this workshop here in the chat session there. So the first question is, for this exercise, what are your goals for this workshop? What are your personal motivations for discovering your mission? The second question then is, by discovering your mission, what do you hope to do? So sort of complete this sentence. By discovering my mission, I hope ... and go ahead and write something down along those lines. What is your personal motivation for wanting to discover your mission or be more faithful in living it out? And that may be rather personal, depending on your circumstances in life, what stage you're at in life. There may be different motivations for why you'd be looking to that. I know some people, on the younger end of things, tend to be trying to, quote, figure life out yet, to say, what is it that I want to be doing with my life? I don't know where to even start. And those of us who are further along in life may be re-examining up to this point, what have I been doing? And I, perhaps looking for a deeper sense of fulfillment or a new direction in which to take things, to say, let's re-examine life and see really what's at the central core of this. And it's worth pointing out too, as you may see in the workbook here, a little bit further on, that the guy who developed the Virtuous leadership system, Alexander Havard, as I was mentioning earlier, he himself discovered his mission later, relatively speaking, later on in life, in his mid to late 40s. Of course, that's certainly not late in life, but in terms of some people being anxious or perhaps a little impatient, much younger, trying to figure it all out ahead of time, it's oftentimes in our 40s and 50s that we really begin to, if not discover our mission for the first time, delve into a much deeper appreciation and understanding of what our particular task in this world is to be. Yes, and I think just to respond to some of the chats that have popped up here, I think that's exactly it. That's a great question. I think that's a fundamental thing to be looking at, is, especially, depending on what your stage in life is the fundamental question of, have I in fact been doing that which I've been called to do? Is what I've been engaged in up till now really aligned with my mission? And even if it has been, perhaps, what is the next step in carrying out my mission? And to have that clarity, I think those are very important things. I think that's the right kind of reason to be here. Of course, there are certainly plenty of other good and right reasons. So now that you've written that down, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next part of the presentation here. So your mission cannot be separated from your story. Your story, not your whims, is what defines your mission, right? We need to delve into our past and discern our meanings. Each one of us has a story to tell, and in fact, we each have a story that we've been telling with our lives. And we need to contemplate our life and fate and circumstances that we've been engaged in, and find the appropriate words to speak about it. It's worth pausing here and examining this a little bit. We all carry around with us, articulated or not articulated, a narrative understanding of who we are, a certain story that we carry with us, a way of telling that story, that directs the way that we understand ourselves, and sheds a certain light and directionality to how we make decisions and what we decide to do and keep doing in our lives. And what's important is to take time at various stages of our life to re-examine that story and to understand better whether that story that we're telling ourselves about ourselves, again, oftentimes inarticulately, it's often held as certain assumptions, but whether that story actually corresponds to reality, to the reality of the real world, and to the reality of who we really are deep inside. And this is huge, actually. This is very, very important in my work as an educator over the past decade, and in some of my work in psychology. This is something that I've seen a lot with some coaching work and such, that we carry with us this narrative notion of who we are, and oftentimes that narrative has been shaped entirely by outside circumstances, and we've not taken ownership of that story, of our contribution to that story. There was a movie a few years back, I think, called The Holiday, right? I think it was starring Cameron Diaz and a couple other people. Anyway, there was one of the women, the protagonist, encounters a Hollywood screenwriter, an old timer, from way back when, the golden age of the silver screen, and he pointed out to this like quaint bit of advice in the film, that he said, you're playing the best friend in your own life. You're not playing the leading lady of your own story. I think that's an insightful kind of thing. Is oftentimes, I mean, there's somebody who has that kind of challenge, where they're not living life as the main character of their own story, and that's one challenge some of us face. And other times, especially in the modern West, we tend to view in the modern world our own story as though we're watching it from the outside rather than being a co-participator with it, or we're letting too many authors have their hand in writing our story rather than letting the hand of divine providence be the primary author, with us as the main character, being a protagonist in the story. Another actually very, very wonderful, if technically not up to snuff in our modern technology in terms of film, another great story that examines this, or another great film piece that looks at the idea of understanding narrative identity and its ongoing evolution as a person begins to take greater ownership of their role as primary character and co-author, is The Never-Ending Story. If you're familiar with that, if you remember that from the 80s, where the young boy cracks open the book and he discovers through the course of reading it that in reading it, it's actually playing out, and he is sort of vicariously or sacramentally sort of co-participating in the story as a primary character, as well as in some ways a co-author by the very act of reading it. But I want you to take a few moments and think about that. Think about that. What do you understand your story to be? And see what some of the key aspects of your story are. And this is really the heart of what we're going to be doing in this workshop, is writing down the key elements of your story and examining what those might be. And then we'll move to the second and third exercises here. But I'm just going to take a moment here to respond to something in the technical thing that's popped up. And I think that should be taken care of now. All right, so we need to find appropriate ways to speak about our past. The key classical example of this process is St. Augustine of Hippo's Confessions, as it's called. That classical piece of work, written in the 4th century in Augustine's own time. It's his autobiography. It's often referred to as a spiritual autobiography, the first in that genre that we have access to in the modern world. But what he's doing in writing out that story is not merely recounting, those who are familiar with this, Augustine of Hippo is not merely recounting he's not just writing a biography. The act of writing his biography is an act of restorying the narrative that he's lived up to now. And he's doing it in the framework of a dialogue with God, where his part of the dialogue, Augustine's part of the dialogue, is the actual writing out of what he's doing, writing out the story, and God's contribution to the dialogue are the events in his life that have led up to this point. And he's re-examining from the very beginning of his life to his life up to that point, re-examining all the major events in his life, or rather those that have been significant to shaping his identity. He's re-examining those in a new light. Excuse me, and from that he's able to weave a coherent narrative thread. And so that's another great example. I would recommend that to read through or begin to look at Augustine's Confessions, over the course of the coming months or year, to really spend some time looking at that as an example of how somebody writes their story. Now that is a very in-depth and long, lengthy narrative. Your own story need not be written out that long, and it can take a variety of different forms. But to answer the fundamental question of who am I, which is, of course, one of the fundamental questions that faces us all as human beings, you need to reflect on your story and to contemplate it. Your mission is not separable from your story. So begin to look at your story through the lens of primary character in your story, and also as co-author. And what is a common thread that's running through my life? And we'll start with, what are the key elements? What are the key elements of my life? And so we're going to actually go ahead and skip the second exercise. I want you to go back and do that at some point in the future if you haven't already kind of taken a look and started writing some things down with that. The second exercise, so exercise 2 in the workbook, is further fleshing out what your goals are for this particular workshop, or answering the question, by discovering my mission, I hope to ... such as gain greater clarity or something like that. The second exercise is a further fleshing out of what those goals are in life. And it may be helpful actually to look at the third exercise first, and then to go back after the workshop and flesh out, to go through exercise 2 yourself and flesh out some of those goals and motivations in light of those other things that we'll have gone through at that point with this workshop. So take a look at exercise 3 if you've got the workbook in front of you here, and that is to begin to write. It says, now you will write down some of the basic elements of your story, the story of your life. So let's begin by identifying what the significant people in your life are, and think about who has had an influence on your life. I just noticed a typo in the workbook. Sorry about that. But who's had an influence in your life, whether that's parents, grandparents, mentors, friends, other significant individuals, some of whom may be living, some of whom may have been dead for a long time. Sometimes we find mentors or significant people who've impacted our life through something that they've written or something they've produced, even though they perhaps lived centuries ago. Somebody like St. Augustine, just to pull on that example again. And write down just a few significant things about each one of these people. So that's in the pages that follow. You'll see there's a chart, or I can't think of the right word, a table that it says people who've inspired you, and according to their category, whether it's relatives, teachers, friends, or others. And in the other column, you'll see words related to those persons. So it doesn't have to write out full sentences or flesh out paragraphs. But at this point, for this exercise, just begin to write down the names of some of those people in those different categories who've had an impact on your life, for better or for worse. And in the second column, next to their name, write down some of the key words related to those persons as you see them, or related to the impact that they've had in your life. And while you do that, I'm going to go ahead and just talk a little bit more about the narrative thread and understanding our story and the people who've been instrumental in our lives. So just getting back to that idea of being a person with a story, is that you have a history and a memory. And one of the interesting things that I'm going to go back to Augustine again, because I used to teach a course specifically on this. One of the things that Augustine does is that he identifies the fact that your past does not exist. Nobody's past, the past as such, doesn't exist in the present, right? That's why it's past tense. It existed. It does not currently exist. And the future, likewise, does not exist yet. Only the present exists. So how is it that your past exists in you? How is that as an impact? Well, it's obviously had an impact. It has directed things to bring you to where you are in the present moment. But the present, your past is in you, in your memory. And so that's why that's where that narrative identity lies. That's where our story lies, is in our memory. And your memory is at the heart of who you are. Memory and identity and emotions are deeply bound up together in sort of one basic part of who we are as human beings. And it's a very complex interplay in the heart, really in the heart of your personhood. So it's also understanding that your story is not merely about you alone. It's also about the people who live on in you from even before you were born. So there's people who live on in you and their impact on you, who have been a part of your life in an active way during the course of your life. It's about the interactions that you have with other people that they've had with you, but also that you have a history that predates you. Your story doesn't begin when you were born. A deep element of your story goes back generations and generations, right? You're the result of a number of people's actions and stories, lifetime after lifetime, leading to this moment. And your story doesn't finish with you alone. It doesn't end with you alone, but it continues on long after you're gone. So part of understanding your mission, discovering your mission through understanding your story, is what we'll flesh out in this workshop is your story, sort of your life, the story of your life, and how that gives light to your mission. But an ongoing thing that will be helpful for you to do as well is to look at the bigger impact. What is your life lifetime's place in sort of a 1,000-year plan, as it were. This much larger story of which your story is just a part. And we all, somewhere in our past, whether that's before we were born or even during our own lifetimes, have elements of our story that are maybe not so savory, not so delightful. There's been bad things that happen to good people. But even these are not a limitation. They can be a source of strength. Our story is a light, your story is a light which allows you to interpret reality with a depth and originality beyond just the superficial. It's a rock that can give you the energy and the security and confidence necessary to make magnanimous decisions, to really strive for great things. Because when you realize that your mission is not just something outside of you, but it's fundamentally a part of your identity, it's actually much more psychologically easy to overcome challenges that come in the face of your mission. So we're going to look at not only who you are and what your life story is, but who are the people that you come from. You're not a monad closed in on itself, satisfied with your own self-sufficiency. You didn't generate yourself, but you come from a people. There's a whole history of lifetimes and generations before you that lead up to this point. This interesting anecdote, there's down the street from where I live in Minneapolis, actually technically on the St. Paul side of the river, in Minnesota, there's in St. Paul is very fond as a city. We've got various neighborhoods have this sidewalk poetry, these short poems of some sort stamped into the concrete of the sidewalk in various places. And one of these, I don't remember all the exact details of it, one of these really identifies this aspect of things. It talks about how you are the fruit of the dreams of countless generations. That people have made decisions that they've crossed oceans, they've come to new worlds, they've established families, they've fought wars, they've fled wars, they've sought peace, they've built villages and they built cities, all with the hope for their children or their grandchildren, great-great-grandchildren. And you're the fruit of that. You're the result of the decisions and dreams and hopes and aspirations of countless generations of people. And that carries a certain, not just weight, but depth. There's a depth and a life that can give a meaning, depth of meaning and originality that can give to our lives. Who are you? Answering that question, who are you and where do you come from? People who can answer these questions with confidence can truly become leaders in their own lives. This helps your heart to become strong and gives you a clearer direction in life. When you feel the comforting presence of those who continue to live on in you, those who've directly impacted your life during your lifetime, and those who continue to live on in you in the same way that you are the fruit of their hopes and dreams. So, as I said, your story is not a limitation, but a strength. It allows you to interpret things. It allows you to interpret things. And so as you take some time to continue to write down some of those people who've inspired you or had an impact on you, and those words related to those persons, you can look at the lower portion of that exercise 3. At the bottom of the third page of the exercise, we said, now that you've identified some of those people and some of those things about those people, why don't you take some time to reflect on what you have in some way received from them. Reflect on those things, the way that they've impacted you. Take a few moments now. I see that one of you has just rejoined again after being dropped off for a few minutes there. Sorry if you're having technical difficulties of some sort. Please feel free to let me know. Again, pop something into the chat if that's working, or I suppose if it's not working, if you're having all those issues, it may not be easy to get a hold of me. But I just want to say something here. If you do have technical issues of some sort, send me a text message on my phone, which is enter into here. Just enter into the chat box. It's 651-260-7225. Feel free to send me a text message there if there's some technical difficulties that you're encountering with this workshop. Either in terms of the chat box, which would of course make you unable to communicate that, or with the sound or visual. So I'll go ahead and let you know about that. But we'll look at that this workshop here, or excuse me, this exercise 3, to see now that you've identified some things about these people that have had an impact on you. Reflect on what you've in some way received from them, and what do you have to be thankful for? What do you have to be grateful for? To begin to cultivate gratitude for what you have learned from them or gained from these people by writing some of these things down. So make a short list of what are these things that I've learned from the people that have had an impact on me. So you've identified, or in the process of identifying, some of those individuals who've had an impact on your life. And next to that, there's words related to those persons as they stand out to you. And then the second step of exercise 3 is to write down a list of what are some of those things that you've learned from these people. And you might have learned the same thing, the same lesson from multiple people. That's why we allow you to condense it into this one place. To say, what are these things that I've learned from these people, or the ways that they've impacted me, that I can be grateful for? Begin to cultivate gratitude. What are the things in particular that I am thankful for that they have had an impact on me, in the way in which they've had an impact on me? So take a few moments to do that. And I think what we'll do, just as by way of sort of housekeeping details here, is because the length of this workshop, actually take a few moments here to allow you to um, to write that. Actually, we're going to take a look at the next exercise as well, since it's along the same lines of elements of your story and the people that have impacted your life. We'll go ahead and look at exercise 4 and go through that, and then we'll actually take let's say a 10-minute break from that, and we'll reconvene at noon. So we're going to go through the exercise 4 here first, and guide you through that. Certainly, again, I want to reiterate, if you have any questions or comments, concerns, requests, dedications, feel free to enter those into the chat box function here. I'd be happy to respond to you. Or if that is not working for you, please feel free to send me a text message. Again, my number is 651-260-7225. You can send me a text message with any questions, comments, or concerns regarding this. But we'll go through and go through exercise 4, and then we'll take a 10-minute break, and then reconvene after that, which should be about 12 o'clock. And then we'll continue on through the other exercises that we'll be looking at and other elements of your story, and beginning to write out some of those key things and going through a deeper understanding of how that relates to your mission, or how that relates to discovering your mission. So to move on to exercise 4. So as we said, your story is not a limitation, but it's rather a strength. We've identified the people that have been in your life that have had an impact on you. Begin to cultivate gratitude. What are those things that I'm grateful for? The lessons that they've taught me, or the ways they've had an impact on me. And then we also begun to understand that our story doesn't begin just with our lives, but goes back further on. Who are the people that you come from? Who are your people? So now let's look at exercise 4 in the workbook. For those of you who have the workbook, you'll see that there should be just after there's an image right after exercise 3, and it's just after that. Those of you who do not have exercise 4, or excuse me, do not have the workbook available to you at this moment, I'll just read through that, and you can begin to write some of these things down. So exercise 4 says, since your story is not only about you, but also about the people and peoples who live on in you, it's necessary to become aware of the influences at work in you. Where are your roots? Where are your roots? I think that's a fundamentally important question for those of us who live and work in the United States, in the New World in general, particularly in North America, across North America, is a deep concern of a lack of rootedness. Certainly that's something characteristic of the modern world in general, and we're all very mobile. But in many places, at least in Europe and the old world, where you live, oftentimes people live in a house that's been there for hundreds of years, or the city that you live in has been around for thousands of years. There's a sense of rootedness that comes with the environment, which we just don't necessarily have that here. And that impacts us as individuals. That's something we need to be aware of. But where are our roots? Because a tree cut off from its roots can't survive, or at least it feels it's weaker and it feels unstable. Deep roots are not reached by the frost, as Tolkien said, and we can redevelop our deep roots by getting more in touch with grafting deeper on to our authentic roots. In that, who are those people that live on in us? Who are your people, right? Who have you what and then not only who but what have you received from your ancestors and their cultures, and what have you received from your country where you live now and have grown up and perhaps for generations have lived. What is it what that you've received from the country you live in? It's important to spend some time reflecting on these things, both the good and the bad, the greatness and the misery or the weakness. Don't be afraid of what you find there, because in discovering your mission you'll experience the freedom to put all these things to use at the service of that mission. See, even the unsavory things of our lives, or the unsavory things about our various ancestors, can still be put at the service of carrying out our mission. They need not be inhibitors, but they nonetheless play a part in our story, and being able to incorporate them with genuineness and authenticity allows us to live more freely and tell our story in a more authentic way. So, some of the questions for exercise 4 to write down are: who are some of the influential people or cultures that live on in you from your roots? Who are some of the influential people or cultures that continue to live on in you from your roots? Perhaps those that you need to get more in touch with. That's sometimes a question that comes up as well. Second, what are the good things that you see within you from these people? What are the good things that you see within yourself that you've received from these people? Then third, what are the things that you see, on the other hand, that you want to overcome or to transform? And take a moment to reflect on these things and to write them down. Of course, we'll have a few moments to continue writing once we take our break, our 10-minute break. But what are those things that you see in yourself that you've received from these people in your past, your ancestors, the influential people or cultures that live on in you? What are those things that you want to overcome or transform? And then reflect on and try and identify what culture it is that you belong to. Answer the question, spend some time reflecting on it, answer the question, what culture do you belong to? And who are, quote, your people? Who are your people? And that may be something that falls along sort of standardly identified cultural lines, or it may be some other definition of group, a certain kinds of people, a certain sub-tribe, quasi-tribe of people, depending on the perhaps the kind of work that you do, the part of the country that you live in, the kinds of people that you hang out with in terms of interests. Those are all things that can influence that. Because many of us perhaps come from a multitude of different cultures historically, in that our ancestors came from different places around the globe. But we may identify with one or another of those cultures, or perhaps a different culture entirely, depending on the circumstances of our own personal lives, so far as the way that we were brought up and the part of the country we live in and so on. And then the next question is to answer, what is great about your nation's culture that you have been given by it? What is great about the nation that you live in? What have you received from your nation's culture, the culture of the place where you live? What is great about that? And what are you grateful for? And then finally, on the converse of that as well, then, is what is it that you want to change about your nation's culture and improve, ways that you would improve it? What are those things about the culture of the place where you live that you would change? What would you do to improve them? Those last two are significant in terms of the external aspect of your mission. We'll see those parts play a key role in the external aspect as elements of your mission. The outward focus, what are the things I want to do in my life? As you remember from the very first slide where we looked at what is that challenges or circumstances in my culture that I want to respond to with dedication, with passion and dedication. And then the earlier questions in this exercise 4 related to that first question of who am I? Of who am I? So in exercise 4, we're really unpacking a little bit more an understanding of who you are in the people that live on in you and the cultural influences that live on in you, for better or for worse, those things that you would change within yourself and those things that you are grateful for within yourself. And then the last 2 or 3 questions for exercise 4 relate to that second portion. What is the cultural or social challenge that you see around you that you want to respond to with passion and dedication? So what's the external focus here? And then in just a moment, we will take a break, and I'll leave this particular slide up here. I'll put my own mic on mute. Feel free to take 10 minutes, come back at 12 noon Central Time, so come back at the top of the hour, depending on where you are at in the country. We come back at the top of the hour here, which would be 12 noon at Central Time. And as you write, we'll continue to write through the story in these different stages through these exercises. But overall, these are the things that we're kind of looking at, is what you'll see up on the screen just now, which is to write about the people who've been instrumental in your life. Also be looking at the books, the movies, music, pieces of art that propel you to unexpected emotional and spiritual heights. This can give insight into what it is you are passionate about, have a deeper understanding of yourself. Often those things that we respond to have a deep resonance with are things that actually reflect ourselves in a deep way. And then we'll also be writing about your country, its greatness in history, its culture, its temperament, the dreams, and its weaknesses, and being honest about those things that we would change, because what are those elements that you want to respond to with change? Again, that gives light, that shed light on what your mission is in life. And what are those ideals that you want to fight for? Those things that particularly inspire you to drive forward and advance in society. And then also looking at the key events in your life until now to discover their meaning. These are all this is a summary in some ways of what we've been going through and what we'll continue to go through in the coming exercises here. So without further ado, I'll leave the broadcast up and running here, and go ahead and take a moment. Don't click out, don't X out of the screen. That might complicate things, but you can just kind of leave this up, so it's easier to log in, easier to access that link again, to continue to just pick up right where we left off. Please just leave the screen up. Don't X out the window or anything like that, such that you would lose access, which would be very unfortunate. Leave this up and we'll go ahead and take a 10-minute break. I'll go ahead and put my own mic on mute, and then I will be back at the top of the hour, a few minutes ahead. Certainly, again, if you have any questions during this time or comments, feel free to send me a message either by text or in the chat box on the screen here. And so here we are, 10-minute break, and we will come back at top of the hour. Okay, and we're back. I'm just going to get a visual change here in case anybody's got it on silence and you stepped away for a moment. Here I am again. We're back, and with just get a few moments to make sure everybody's collected and ready to go here. If you can give some indication of that. I know some of you are on, a couple of you are on different devices that are unable to access the chat function, but feel free to send me the Facebook message or email as you have done, which is great to be in touch. Of course, if you can use the chat, go ahead and use that as well. Otherwise, just give a thumbs up. Oh, there we go, to see that that we're all set and ready to go, and we will continue on with the workshop. Let's get the screen share to work again. Okay. And we should be showing to everybody here now. We're back to that slide that we had up. I hope you had a fruitful little break there, a few moments to reflect and to write down, to finish up some of those exercises, exercise 3 and 4 there. And I am having a little bit of difficulty with my audio picking up here, but it looks like we're back to that. Okay, looks like everybody is here. We're back. Hope everything's gone well. And if certainly again, if you have any technical issues pop up, or for some reason you can't hear me or see me or the slide for one reason or another, send me a message through some alternative means. I know some of you have sent a Facebook or an email message to myself. That works just great. Otherwise, like I said, text or certainly in the chat box here looks good. And so we will continue on. If anything comes up, just let me know. And again, if you have any questions, by all means, let me know. So let's see here. I'm gonna actually, if you excuse me for one brief moment. Here we are. So I realized some of my slides were just a little out of order there. But the next thing we'll be looking at is your talent. So the idea that your mission, which is, of course, we said related to your story, is also related to your talent. That is, what specifically are you good at? Most people tend to think they know what they're good at. Great example is 100% of all people polled believe that they are above average drivers when it comes to traffic. The cars, right? We all know that can't be right. Everybody thinks they're a better than average driver, and everyone else on the road doesn't know what they're doing, right? Great example. So we all tend to think we know what we are good at, and certainly we can know that after much experience. But it's important also to ask other people. We can often be wrong. We have a great capacity for self-delusion in many realms of our lives. So asking other people, listening to them, right? That's 2 steps, both of which are equally important. Asking someone else and listening to them, really taking it in. What do other people say about you? What are those things that I'm good at? And so one of the exercises that I would encourage you to do is in exercise, excuse me a moment here. I thought it was 5, but it must be the next one here, is exercise 6, just to skip ahead and take a look at that, is actually some text, some example text of what you might send as a message through email or whatever your preferred mode of communication is, to send a message to some friends and coworkers. So exercise 6 will actually be to ask other people for their feedback. You don't need to take a moment to do that now. We'll get around to that, but just to know that that's there. I've actually pre-written a little copy there. Feel free to copy and paste it, edit as you feel free to edit as you would like and as you see fit. But just asking a friend to find out what it is they say, asking some friends. I can get a couple of people, because different people have different perspectives, and not everybody is right either about those things that we're good at or not good at, but it's insightful information, very helpful, because analytical feedback, analyzing that feedback rather, can really help you discover what your specific gifts are. And though I don't think it really applies to anybody here, certainly there are people that you know in your own life who could really benefit from greater clarity on what their mission is. Some of them on the younger scale of things. It's worth pointing out that it tends to be rather hard to know what we are good at prior to age 30. There's a lot of young people in their 20s or even their early 30s who say, okay, well, I'm good at X, Y, or Z, but I'm not really sure what I want to do in my life. But they've only really done 2 or 3 things. Just think of somebody just getting out of college. You simply haven't experienced enough in most cases in terms of what are some of those different things. Go out and try different things. You should explore different avenues. If you're interested in art but you've never done art, try it out. That doesn't mean make that your profession, but try many different things. Is good advice for young people to give to young people, and have them ask their friends and colleagues to help them discover what their specific talent is. They may know some of the things they're good at, but they may have undiscovered talents that just simply haven't been explored yet. So that's often good advice for younger people, and certainly college age and under, is oftentimes they just simply haven't had the time. They haven't had the time to explore a number of different avenues. But what we're going to take a look at then is exercise 5 here, and really start to flesh out, go through the exercise to flesh out what are some of those things, not just that your talents, but what are those things that really light you up? What are those things that you get excited about, that drive you, that you're passionate about? And so we divided that into 4 basic categories. If you've got the workbook, you'll see there's 4 columns here, and this is the first portion. There are 4 different segments to exercise 5, and we'll take a moment to look at those here. So take some time to reflect on the following questions. Write the answers in these tables that follow. If you don't have that printed off for yourself just now, I encourage you certainly to take some paper to write down some thoughts now as we go through it. And that is to answer the question, what lights you up? What are the talents you see in yourself? Remember, exercise 6 is where we'll look at actually getting feedback from other people. That's something you can do on your own time. You can take some time to do, perhaps later on during this workshop, to send a few messages to some folks to get their feedback. But right now we're looking at what do you see in yourself, because that gives us some insight. Where each one of us has a valid perspective. Our perspective on what we're good at is a valid perspective, just like other people's perspectives are valid. And we want to incorporate all those different perspectives, because we can see ourselves in a way that no one else can see ourselves, because we're seeing as the subject. You are the seeing subject of your own life. Only you can say I to yourself, or me, as it were, right? But other people can see me in a way that I can't see myself, right? Other people see you in a way that you cannot see yourself, so that's why their perspective is important to take in as well. So, answering the first question here with exercise 5, write down some thoughts on what lights you up. What are the things that you just feel more alive when you're doing? What are those life-giving activities, those things that really bring you life and joy when you do them, or when you see them, things that you are attracted to? And we've got these in different categories of physical talents, things that you excel at or are passionate about, are life-giving activities to you in the physical sphere, whether that is something that can encompass anything from athletics to artistry, right? What are some of those physical things, physical talents? Then there are intellectual talents. Perhaps those are academic subjects or disciplines, things you happen to know a lot about, things you love studying or reading about. And that may in fact even be not just nonfiction, but if you're attracted to a particular genre of fiction literature, if there's a certain topic or subject matter that you really enjoy reading or studying, that can be across fiction or nonfiction, or things that you happen to know a lot about and love talking about. Depending on your temperament, right, it's going to express in different ways. You may think about it in different ways, whether it's something that you read or that you talk about or share with others, or something that you study, or rather something that you enjoy doing or accomplishing, right? You might frame it in any of those aspects. But you've got physical talents, you've got intellectual talents, you may have spiritual talents, and that's not necessarily just sort of in the religious sense of the word, the theological sense of the word, but I suppose you could say this is where in some circles people may speak of sort of supernatural gifts or spiritual gifts of the Holy Spirit, something like that. That in some circles of Christian thought, people may use that kind of terminology. Or charisms would be another term, and just other talents. But even in spiritual talents, you may think of something just empathy, rapport with others. You're really good at, or you're feel very strongly about, that you have a talent of really connecting with others or understanding others well, or helping them solve their problems, or towards healing, or towards preaching or teaching or something like that. You may find that in that category of spiritual talents. And then sort of the catch-all other talents, things that you're not sure how you would classify them, but you enjoy doing them, or you believe that you are fairly good at them, right? To take some time to write these down. They don't have to, this isn't bingo, right? You don't have to fill out the whole box. But you see there's some columns and then rows for some different talents to take some time and reflect and write those down. And then while you're doing that, certainly you can continue. I understand that take some time to write that down. You can continue doing that now. You can certainly go back and visit that. I'm just going to, for the sake of people being at different paces with that, to go ahead and look at the second question as well, to explain that out a little bit. And that is to reflect on this question, which is, what works of art, literature, music, or movies propel you to unexpected emotional heights? What are those things that profoundly move you? What are those things that profoundly move you? And we've got 4 different columns there. Certainly, they don't have to be restricted to that. If you can think of something else, certainly write that in as well. But the 4 columns would be books, movies, songs and poems, or artwork. And you may have things all in one category, or you may split between 2 different categories. You might have things across all categories. But what are those songs or movies or stories or pieces of art that you've seen that deeply resonate with you? That reflect in some way, perhaps something of yourself, or that you have a deep emotional reaction to, or emotional response to? What are those things that move your heart? It might be a song, if that's something by Leonard Cohen, or the Miserere by Gregorio Allegri, or something by Vivaldi, or something more modern, contemporary. Whatever it might be, something that resonates with you. Same with poems, poetry, movies. I mentioned a couple of movies. What are some movies, perhaps, or books that you've read? Pieces of art, things that resonate with you, because then we can begin to understand ourselves a little bit more. And there may be something about those pieces of art that shed light on interpreting your story in a way that's more authentic, in a way that's more in touch with reality, about the core of who you really are. And there's things we may find out about ourselves because of the things that the kinds of art in various genres or various media that resonate with us. It can show us something about ourselves. This is one of the greatest tools, the greatest effects of art, right? Is to reveal to us something about ourselves, and to reveal to us something about God, to reveal to us the divine. And oftentimes, really, really good art in whatever category it is, whether it's a story, movie, song, or some other visual art, or architecture for that matter, is to reveal to us in a mysterious way, through its beauty, the intersection between the divine and the human, where in some ways it's not uncommon, right, to hear somebody express their response to a work of art, or to a musical piece or a beautiful architecture, as somehow the divine touching them, right? God touched them through this artwork. And there's something in that. There's a lot of fruit for meditation and reflection on, to discover something of ourselves, because there is, in the design of different things, stories, movies, songs, poems, art, architecture, something that, as I said earlier, reflects ourselves. And that can be, at a general level, human, something that's very human about this particular piece, that we see something of ourselves at a broad level reflected in this piece, or something more personal, that this piece, it it always has resonated with you. You've always had a powerful emotional response to you. It has moved you. And over time and reflection, you discover that that is in many ways because it reflects to you something about yourself of which you were previously unaware. And we can become aware of those things about ourselves. And that can shed light on our mission and the way in which we may carry out our mission. Right? Two people may have a very similar mission, but because of just various aspects of their personality, you might carry it out in two radically different ways, just because your temperament is different. And we'll say a little bit about temperament in a moment here. So while you're writing those down, we'll go ahead and take a look at the third part of exercise 5. And that is to answer the question, what are the main ideals of your life that you are willing to fight for? So now we're going back to that kind of core thing or things that you want to respond to. So we've looked at, in some sense, what more commonly understand as our talents, right? What are those things that you identify yourself as being good at or that are life-giving activities? And then we're looking at other things that are external to yourself, works of art, books, movies, stories, songs, poems, literature that move you, that ignite your heart. And now we're looking at other things. That what are your ideals? And remember, ideals are in many ways like stars in navigation at sea, right? You can navigate a ship at sea by looking at the stars, using it as guiding lights or compass. That's what our ideals or values are. They guide us. Which is distinct from virtues. Virtues are habits that we want to develop in ourselves, skills at actually being able to sail the ship, to continue with that metaphor. But ideals, what are those ideals that you hold strong in your heart? Those things that you are willing to fight for. And just because you hold some ideals about others doesn't mean that the others are bad things, and these are good things. It's not in the category of good or bad, but of the broad set of ideals that are great things to strive for in the world, what are those things that you personally feel most passionate about? Have at a deep level, not just at a superficial level, but at a deep level, what are those things you cling to as being, this is a life ideal? These are the things I want to see in myself, in the world around me, and in society at large. These are the things that I want to respond to. Framed in terms of ideals, not just the challenges that you might see, but something positive to strive towards, not just something negative that we want to respond to. We can see a problem, may not guide us in terms, if we see the problem alone, there may not be much guidance in terms of how we might respond to the problem. We've already looked at perhaps what are some of those challenges that we want to overcome in the previous exercise, and now we're looking at what are the ideals, what are the things that you would respond with to solve some of those challenges. But what are the ideals? What are those things that you hold up that you want to see in yourself, in those around you, and in the world at large? And in the final portion of this exercise, we'll go ahead and look at what are the influential events in your life. And there's two columns here. One is the actual event, briefly named the influential events in your life. And then the second column next to that is to answer the question, why does this event move me? So the question to answer here overall is, what have been the most influential events in your life up to now? That is, those that move you and inspire you even now as you think about them. What are those events? They might be concrete, specific, one-off events. Something happened. They may be a longer process of time, something that took a long time to happen, perhaps a group or an institution you were involved in, or a relationship that you had. Or they might be a dream, a recurring dream, or a realization that you had, or a book that you read, or something perhaps more abstract, a moment of epiphany, as it were. Oftentimes people will point to a dream that they had, or a couple of dreams that they've had that have actually shape the course of their life, or have the potential to shape the course of their life. It's always been a source of inspiration to them, and profoundly moving to them, even though they may not know what it means in some sort of articulable way. But to be able to identify at least what those things are, and what is it about that event or that that period in your life or that dream or what have you. What is it about that thing? I'll use the word event as a catch-all, but what is it about that event that moves you? What are those things that you find particularly moving about that? So as you take some time to reflect on that and to write those down, these are all, and I just want to kind of step back for a moment and look sort of where does all of this fit in to discovering your mission. I want to say that these are all sort of key or core elements to understanding your mission, or rather understanding your story. So as we begin to weave these things together as we go on, you'll start to see some links and some commonality. Because here we've identified now events in your life. Earlier on, we identified some key people in your life, some key relationships in your life that have been influential. We've identified now some key events in your life that have been that profoundly move you. Right, we're looking at the present tense. How do they inspire you and move you even now? Because the past lives on in you now through your memory, in your heart. And then we've also looked at what are some of the influences in your life from outside, from even before your life, your roots, the culture, your ancestors, the generations back that have led up to you, those things that interest you, what are those passions and talents that you have, and what are those pieces of art that surround you, that you respond to, that you have a deep emotional response to, that resonate deeply with you. And so all of these things are key elements to your story, and we're looking at them in different aspects, looking at them from different perspectives, looking at your life story from different perspectives, different elements of it, so that then you can sit down and actually write it out in sort of a chronological format to say, okay, here it is from beginning to end, and you'll begin to see a common thread. And that common thread is at the core of your mission, as we'll see. I do want to briefly mention something about temperament here. And without going in depth on temperament, that's a whole course in itself that I could teach, that I do teach in some contexts, on the idea of temperament, is that to not forget that your temperament is also a talent. So now what is temperament? Just briefly, your temperament is sort of the raw material that you're made up of. And we're all human beings. So at a fundamental level, we're all the same. We're all human beings. And we all come in two varieties, man or woman. And but among that, we all have different particular ways in which we respond to the world around us, right? And that can be classically categorized in 4 different ways. And that's what we mean by temperament. Temperament is not your personality. Your personality is the combination of temperament plus your character. What have you done with that raw material, for better or for ill, virtues and vices, the habits that you've cultivated, or what are those things that you've cultivated over time? That's your character. Those two together, temperament and character, form your personality. And so your temperament is not definitive of who you are. It's an element of sort of what makes you tick, as it were. And classically has been categorized into 4 basic types of temperament. Almost nobody is purely one or the other. We're some combination of 2 of the 4. But your temperament, briefly, how does that relate as a talent to you and your mission? If you have a melancholic temperament, you have a gift for bucking the status quo and generating new ideas. The melancholic temperament, by the way, is marked as having a slow but deep and sustained response to stimuli in the world. So melancholic temperament is fundamentally characterized by or driven by ideas. Fundamental weakness of somebody with a melancholic temperament is the virtue of audacity. This is a challenge that you have, not something that can't be overcome, but it's a challenge there. But if you're melancholic, you tend to have an idea for being able to reject the status quo and generate new ideas. You have a profound ability to see and dream new things. If you have a choleric temperament, you have a great gift, natural gift, for starting big projects on the foundation of various ideas. So somebody with a choleric temperament is marked by a quick and sustained response to stimuli, tends to be driven by action, accomplishing things, doing things is what sort of the driving force of the choleric temperament. And a weakness for somebody with a choleric temperament or challenge to be overcome is in the area of the virtue of humility, that is seeing other persons as persons and not merely means to accomplishing some goal. And then if you are of the sanguine temperament, you have a gift for gathering people around that project. And you know, somebody of a sanguine temperament is marked by a quick but ephemeral response to stimuli. And I'm actually just gonna wonder if I can pull up. Let's see if this shares here. I've got something I can just give a close-up of temperament here. And I'm going to try and pull that up. I realize that may be advantageous at this point here. So give me just a moment. There we go. And I'll just share this here with everyone. So you can see, or should be able to see, I'm going to quick change something on the view. Single page. And here we are. So you can see the different temperaments. So the choleric temperament is action-oriented. The sanguine temperament is people-oriented. And a challenge for somebody with a sanguine temperament to overcome would be endurance, or perseverance, continuing on with the same thing. So with a sanguine temperament, if you have a sanguine temperament, you have a gift for gathering people around that project. You're really good at gathering people together, motivating people, inspiring them. And if you have a phlegmatic temperament, you have a gift for bringing rationality and balance, equanimity to a project to ensure its long-term success. So phlegmatic temperament is somebody who tends to be marked by a slow and ephemeral response to stimuli. Is fundamentally peace-oriented. That is sort of maintaining balance. Is afraid of offend. Tends not to want to offend, but maintain balance and rationality, an even keel way of thinking, common sense approach to reality. And so each of these temperaments, depending on whatever your temperament is or combination thereof, because as we'll see, your temperament can be a combination of, there we go, you got a combination of two of the four temperaments. So there's really, what is that? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 16 or 12 different temperaments. And so, yeah, that's right. Yeah, 12 different sort of temperament combinations that each of these, this maybe not be showing. I hope it's showing to you. But these are the 4 basic temperaments that you see there. But each of these is also a talent in its own right. So whatever your temperament, it also brings a talent. So if you're melancholic, it gives you it's the natural ability or natural gift at generating new ideas. If you have a choleric temperament, it's a natural gift at starting big projects, carrying things out. If you have a sanguine temperament, you have a natural gift for gathering people together around an idea or a project. And if you have a phlegmatic temperament, you have a natural gift for bringing rationality and equanimity to sort of an even keel perspective to things, to a project. So I'm going to close that out now and open up the previous, the other presentation as well here. Just a moment as I switch out the screen. Okay. So those are some of the things about your temperament, how that plays in as a talent as well. It plays in as a talent. I know we covered sort of a lot of material right there, but I'm trying to sum up briefly something that really is a standalone presentation. Just looking at some of the chat things here, which is very interesting. Beauty and the Beast. Beauty reflects the divine. I think it's really great. Good at residential finish work. That's true. Great that Mr. Welter. That's a great example in terms of something external that you find as a physical talent or artistic talent, depending on how you look at it, which I think is both. So yes, so beauty reflects the divine. No, I think it's absolutely right. That's right. And paying attention to that too, and not just we've done this exercise. We'll write down something about what are those pieces of art. Just to touch on that again here, as I see some of the chat things have just popped up for me. Some of the pieces of art that we respond to eventually is also to become now aware of those things. Right? There's just the nature of being human. Right? You're writing things down now. We're going through this workshop now. But you'll see, of course, over time, new things will come to light or come to mind. Just say, hey, wait, I forgot about that. Write that down. Work that in there, right? That's why discovering your mission, writing out your story, we want to write out your story, is a process that's going to take time, just because of the way that we're made to be as human beings in the world. To we live in time. We do. We discover new things and we remember new things over the course of time, which is actually helpful in writing something out. Psychologically, there's something about physically writing it down and not merely typing it in. I feel, excuse me for a moment, I feel kind of separated from the world here. I talk so much with my hands, so I thought I'd bring it back here. There's something about writing things down and not merely typing them in that engages our neurological and psychological structures in a different way. To writing things out actually allows them to become inscribed even more deeply into our awareness or into our heart, as it were. But then also it opens up a certain mode of creativity and discovery. So when we're writing something out physically by hand, as a pen or pencil on paper, there may be new things that come to light, new things that come to mind for you, more things that come to mind for you that that you would think of as you go. So in writing out your story, it should be a process where you keep revisiting this. So you'll take these different elements that we're exploring in this workshop, you'll tie them together in writing out your story, over, say, the course of a week or something, as you've got the ability or time. But then, every couple of months or every year, revisit that story. And it's not meant to be strictly an autobiography in the classic sense of the term, but something more of a process, of a tool, an exercise of exploration and generativity, that you discover then more clearly what that common thread is in your life. And like I said, there's going to be more things that that you encounter in life going forward that you can then come back to and incorporate in and see the interaction between your story as you understand it now and, say, a year, 5, 10 years from now, those things that have happened in between then, based on what you know of your story now and how those interact and how that shapes and refines your story as you progress through life. One last point on the temperaments is that there are a couple of temperament tests that are out there that I found to be fairly good. You want to kind of do all three of them and triangulate to find out what, to get a better sense of what your temperament is. And I've got the links for those in that workshop on the PDF. And excuse me, this is the workshop in the workbook PDF. I have those links for you there to go ahead and explore around with those to the degree that you're interested in that. It can be a great helpful tool. And so I want to just have you take a look at exercise 6 in the workbook. Again, that is just to take a look at that. You don't have to do that right now, but take some time today. I encourage you really to take some time at the end of the day today, or when you've got an opportunity today after the workshop, to copy and paste that message, edit it so it sounds like you, and whatever else you think would be appropriate to change in there, and send that to somewhere between 5 to 10 friends and coworkers to get their feedback, to get their input on what are those things that you're good at, what are your talents. I encourage you to do it today because, as we all know, our attention is distracted and pulled many different directions every day, and it's very easy to forget about something, to overlook something, or to keep putting it off, and then we never get around to getting that feedback, which means that we're missing a major perspective of our who we are, what our talents are, what our story is, and we're able to incorporate that into our story. And so I just say to do that today, as you're able, to send a message out to a couple of people to try and get some feedback. And what are those? Asking them, what are some of those things that you are good at, your talents? What are those things that often it may be one way to frame it up to some people, because they may struggle with answering that. But one way to frame it up that might be helpful as well would be to say, or to ask in some way, what are those things that when I do them or I talk about them, you can see that I'm much more full of life, I'm much more alive or happy when X, Y, or Z is present, or when I'm doing X, Y, or Z, whatever it may be. And so that might be another way that somebody might frame that might make sense to them. So now we've written down various elements of your story. And when you weave together all these disparate elements into a coherent narrative, or at least vignettes of your life in sort of chronological order, to see the development of various things and finding what that common thread is, when you write your story, it should be, indeed it must be, dramatic, poetic, symbolic, and short. It needs to be dramatic in order to make it attractive to you and to others. Your life is a drama. There's a deep dynamism to the story of your life. And if you don't see that, that itself is illustrative of something, can shed light on something, how you understand yourself and the world around you. But that we're all, each one of us, our life and the story of our life, our story that we're in, is an adventure. It's a quest. And writing it out, we need to write it out as though it is a dramatic quest, which is true to the reality, even if that is not the way we've been telling the story to ourselves or to others, but that it is dramatic. It needs to be able to impel our heart. This story itself needs to be able to move us and to move our heart. It needs to be poetic. I don't mean in rhyme and meter, in some sort of epic format, but it needs to be poetic in a sense of capturing greatness of the little things. You know, to go back to the great example of this exercise, this process of writing out your story, of restoring your personal identity, your narrative, as what Augustine did with Augustine's Confessions, as they're called, is that he spends an enormous amount of time on some otherwise seemingly minuscule and superficial event, right? Stealing pears, right? He famously, as a child, a young prepubescent teen, adolescent, something like that, stole a pear from a neighbor's tree and didn't eat it. And he spends pages examining this, right? As to how this was the most evil thing he's ever done and why and all that. It's easy to kind of brush that off or think he's over exaggerating something, or that he's merely making a philosophical or theological point. He's not, though, because that's the subjective element of the story, is that for him that was a profoundly changing event. It was a profoundly significant event in a small action. So when we write our own story, when you write your own story, hopefully, again, it need not be as long as Augustine's autobiography, but short in many ways, as we'll see, but it needs to have that poetic quality to it to capture the significance of even small things. And then it needs to be symbolic, because, and much in the same way, it's symbolic of something bigger, some event in your life or some piece of art or dream or music or song or whatnot that has had a great impact on you, profoundly moves you, can be symbolic, or often is symbolic of something much greater, in your life. And so it needs to be poetic and symbolic, and also short. And make your story short and focus on that which is important. That's why we're sort of writing this, we're looking at the different elements of your story so that you can piece it together. We're not going chronologically, because it's easy to get lost in the weeds if you were just to sit down and write your story as a biography. I was born, I grew up, I did this, I did that. But we're looking at what are the most significant elements of your story first. What are the building blocks of your story, so we can focus just on that which is significant and important, just on the key details of your story and the overall theme of your story. So that's why we're looking at it from this perspective, starting with the elements, and then you will weave those various elements together. As we said, temperament is an important part of your story as well, or an important part of it. It's a talent, and understanding that. And then what you'll do is you'll take these elements of your stories, you weave them together into a coherent narrative that is dramatic, symbolic, poetic, and short and to the point, concise, I suppose would be the appropriate word. You'll be able to distill from that. You'll see in that process of writing your narrative a common thread, and that common thread is at the core of your mission. So now you're ready to look at exercise 7, and this is something you may actually do more later on today and over the course of the coming days and weeks, is to begin to formulate your mission in a concise and powerful way. So spend some time reflecting over the various elements of your story as you've written it thus far. Your goals, which we started out with, what are your goals, and how those would be fleshed out in exercise 2, and motivations, and the impact of various people, events have had on your life. Who are the people who continue to live on in you? Who are your people? What is your culture? What is your temperament, and how does your temperament serve as a talent or a gift to you? What are your talents? What are your gifts? Weaving together all of these elements, all with gratitude for what you've received to bring you to where you are now in life. Doing this with gratitude is an important element of that perspective of being able to discover our mission is to be grateful, because to be grateful for these different elements, to look at these elements of your story with gratitude, opens you up to that receptivity to see, to be able to see what that common thread is, to be able to receive what your mission is as a gift. And so it's important to already put yourself in that frame of heart, of gratitude, to receive what your mission is and have greater clarity on what your mission looks like going forward. So you reflect on those different elements of your story, you'll begin to see a common thread or a common theme running through them. At the center, or around the center around which these elements of your story seem to revolve, they seem to coalesce around a common theme, or in one particular one particular subject or kind of activity. That central theme is the beating heart of your mission. So exercise 7 then is to walk through these steps, and we're just going to talk about them now. And you can jot down a few things, but I encourage you to actually then take some time later today, tonight or early tomorrow morning, depending on whether you're a night or a morning person, to spend some time reflecting on all this, looking over what you've written down, and to do the following. And that is to first write out the top 5 key words or main ideas that come to mind when you're looking over the different elements of your story as you've accomplished it different elements of your story as you've identified them thus far through this workshop. Looking over the different elements of your story, what are those 5 key ideas? Just 5 key ideas or main ideas. And if you're like me, you probably write down 25 things, and then you have to distill from that, sort of coalesce them together to figure out what the 5 core things are. Write down 5 of those things, those main ideas. Write them down in the space on the workbook under exercise 7. And then secondly, taking those 5 key words or main ideas, if you could only keep 3 of those words, or if you could distill those 5 ideas into just 3 words, what would they be? You can either write them down in the area below, and in that second part of exercise 7, or you can highlight or circle how they are. The series of words, the word cloud that you'll have written in the first part of exercise 7. But trying to take everything that you see in terms of the elements of your story, try and see what are those 5 main ideas or keywords that come to mind when you look at those elements, and then take those 5 keywords and pick the top 3 of those 5, or of those 5, can you condense those into 3 words? You distill those out into just 3 words and write down what those 3 words are. This is where every step in this particular process is really important, to sort of set up your mindset right, to orient your vision, and to sort of begin to really coalesce these ideas together in your mind to be able to see that. To see these things. This is the beauty of being able to write things out, is that they're not just stuck in your head, but you can then freeze them out in time. It's like a freeze frame on your thoughts and the movements of your heart. And so in writing this out, you're able to freeze frame those movements of your heart and thought and mind, and be able to get those down on paper and to look at them objectively and to see, and in seeing and writing, to actually then discover new things. So now that you've got those 3, or at least you will at that point have those 3 words. You've taken the 5 main points, you've distilled them into 3 words, just 3 words. Now, this is the next step in exercise 7, would be you now want to write out a 2 to 3 sentence summary of your story centered around those 3 words from the previous step. So you've been able to distill it down into 3 words. And then you're able to flush it out from those 3 words. So with those 3 words, write out a 2 to 3 sentence summary of your story, using those, or centered around those 3 words. I hope what I'm saying is making sense here with that. Don't worry about writing out a long narrative. This part of the exercise is not to write out your full story, but if you were to give the 3-sentence synopsis of your story, taking those 3 words as the core of your story, how would you write that out? Just a brief summary. One way to look at it would be this, is just to write a brief 2 to 3 sentence summary of your story, a 3-sentence summary of what the main idea of your story would be if it were a book or a movie. So looking at the elements of your life, you've taken the 5 main themes, distilled it into 3 basic words, and as sort of the main idea or the core of your story. Now write a 2 to 3 sentence synopsis of that story or movie or book. In some ways, imagine if the main character of this story, that's you, went on a quest through a process of transformation, sort of the hero's quest, if you're familiar with mythological literature at all, sort of on a hero's quest, this process of transformation, how would you summarize that quest in a few sentences? You see, so objectively looking at the elements of your story, distilling it out into 5 ideas, wrap that up into 3 words, and then write a brief 2 to 3 sentence summary of the quest or that process of transformation that your story is on. Assuming that the character in that story, that is you, which you're looking at it in some sense from the outside, that summing up the plot of that story. So then, once you have those 2 to 3 sentence summary, spend some time refining and distilling those sentences down into a single powerful statement that identifies your mission. So now you've got a 2 to 3 sentence summary, and then you should be able to distill that down into 1 sentence. And this is what we might call your mission statement. And I don't mean that mission statement, don't think about it in the way you might think about a corporate mission statement. Those tend to by far miss the mark on understanding what a mission is. But it's a statement of your mission. So you're able to take the elements of your life. You've got 5 main ideas. You've distilled those 5 main ideas into 3, excuse me, I'm gonna use my hands to talk again. So you've got all these elements of your story. You've distilled them into 5 main ideas. And then you're able to take those 5 main ideas and condense them into 3 words, 3 concepts, 3 basic words. You write out a summary or synopsis using those 3 words, around the idea of those 3 words. And now you're taking that synopsis and being able to summarize that synopsis into 1 sentence, that encapsulates your mission. Now, the elements of the mission are to be both broad and narrow. And I'll go back to that. Go back to that slide to show you. When we say broad and narrow, this means they need to be broad enough. That statement, the final statement, has to be broad enough that can be accomplished in a variety of different ways, also narrow enough that it speaks to you personally every single day. It has to be narrow and precise enough to speak to you personally. So it has to be precise enough to move you. It has to be precise enough to move you. Precise enough to move you, but broad enough to be carried out in a variety of different ways, because of course you're going to encounter a variety of different things in life. If you were, as though you were on a quest, you'll encounter a variety of different challenges and puzzles that must be solved, challenges that must be overcome. But your mission needs to be able to be carried out and accomplished in a variety of different ways. That doesn't mean your mission can be carried out doing anything you want, anything you feel like. That's not what we're saying here. But that it has to be applicable to a variety of different kinds of circumstances that you may find yourself in. But it needs to be narrow enough, it needs to be precise enough to serve as a guiding light, as a pillar of fire, to lead you on your path to accomplish your mission, to actually be able to live it out, to be compelling enough to get out of bed every day, to say, this is what I'm about. I'm going to get out of bed because this is the mission that I am on. This is what I must accomplish. This is my contribution to humanity. This is what God has sent me into the world to do. That's what we're talking about with the precision of your mission, but broad enough to be applicable in a variety of different circumstances, which you may find yourself in different stages of your life. Now, the purpose of this statement is to be a way for you to remember what it is you are about in life, to remember what it is you are about, and to use it as a tool for discernment in making decisions. So something memorable that comes to mind when you must go through your day-to-day and make decisions about your future, in both the short term and the long term. So you may need to go through a few drafts of this until you're satisfied, but that's okay. Remember, this is not a static or finished product, but a tool for your ongoing transformation and growth. So a tool for your ongoing transformation and growth. So one final thing that comes up sometimes is, okay, so great, I've discovered my mission, I know what it is I'm about, but then there's this company I work for, right? Or there's this organization I belong to. How do I harmonize these two? And to that we say, your personal mission and the mission of your organization do need to harmonize. They need to meet harmoniously. So a mission of an organization acquires its true meaning if it harmoniously merges with the personal mission of each of its members, right? If you have people that work for you in some company or organization, it behooves you, it's your responsibility as their supervisor, to use lack of a better word, to have lack of a better word there, is to help them fulfill their own mission in life, right? And to help them find a way where either their personal mission harmonizes with the mission of the organization, or you may find this for yourself, right? That if I'm unable to fulfill my personal mission in this organization, I either need to be in a different position in the organization where that can be lived out and fulfilled, or I'm in the wrong place and it's time for a change or a move, that I may need to shift places and move on to a space where I can accomplish my mission. Because once you've identified what your mission is, once you've discovered your mission, identified what that is in life, then that should be the real source and compass for making decisions in your life about your present and about your future, what it is you are to do. Because if this is what God has given you to do in this life, this is built around those things that you find most fulfilling in life, those things that give you the most life and make you most alive, then that's what you need to be about doing, because life is short. Because life is short and eternity is long. And when it's time to cash in the chips and make an accounting of things, we're responsible for what we've done and whether we've carried out our mission in life. And we may need to be creative about how we carry out that mission in life. I believe we're probably all familiar with the Christmas Carol, right? Just having sort of wrapped up Christmas itself, still continuing on sort of the celebration here, but of the season. But the idea of the Christmas Carol, if you look at the character of Jacob Marley, right, the deceased ghost who comes back to visit Scrooge, says be haunted by three spirits, and Scrooge says you had a great mind for business, and the ghost of Jacob Marley says, business. The common welfare was my business. Humanity was my business. So taking care of other people, these were the things that were my business. I should have been focused on my business. I wasn't focused on my business in the deep sense of the word. I wasn't focused on what doing my mission was, right? That's his great lament as he suffers eternal torment. He was in a position, it's not to say he couldn't have carried out those things as a businessman, as a merchant and trader that he was, right? He, in his accounting office, he could have carried out those things through his corporation, but he wasn't focused on doing his mission through his corporation, right? Had Jacob Marley been more creative, he could have utilized the corporation he was a part of, the partnership, him and Scrooge. He could have utilized that business in the conventional sense of the term to carry out his mission of caring for the welfare of humanity. And that's, of course, in a broad sense, that's not necessarily a personal mission. It was the mission of each one of us. But there are people who find themselves in a company or organization where they find that their personal mission can't be carried out in that particular role, or perhaps even is at odds with the mission of that company, in which case we need to be bold and be able to make a change. Because at the end of the day, institutions, nations, countries, organizations, these all die. These things are all mortal and corrupt into dust. It is human beings that are immortal. It's you and I that will live for eternity, and we need to become who we're meant to become a more real self, and to carry out and live our mission every day. And that's my hope for you, is that coming out of this workshop, you'll be able to spend some time reflecting and contemplating these elements of your story, writing it out, finding that coherent narrative and that common central thread of your story and your life, to be able to articulate your mission in a clear and compelling way, so as to give greater clarity and meaning to your life and direction to your life, and to help others to do so as well. Because if we all carry out our mission, if we were all about what we're meant to be about, if we're all living out and accomplishing what God has made us to accomplish, what we have been in our hearts made to accomplish in this world, we'll set the world on fire. So thanks for participating in this workshop. I'm going to wrap it up here, as we're getting close to 1 o'clock, nearly 1. And I know many of you have to go on to the next thing. I'm going to stick around here for a little bit, so you can feel free to type in a message. In fact, even once I close out, just a technical detail of this, once I end the live stream or the broadcast, you'll be able to still make comments underneath, and that's someplace that we can still interact if you have questions or comments or concerns or follow questions or things for clarification, or specific questions for particular application. I'm certainly happy to stick around and answer those, or feel free to send me an email or a message through those media that you've been doing so. So again, thanks a lot, and God bless, and enjoy the rest of your day. We'll see you.